All right, last thing I want to talk about here. You dropped a very interesting big list about the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2023. Your top 10 guys for the upcoming season. Just for those of you who missed it, as me and Steven went over it the other day, Najee Harris sits there at 10, George Pickens 9, Isaac Seumalo at 8, James Daniels 7, Pat Freiermuth 6, Alex Highsmith 5, Deontay Johnson, Cam Hayward, Minka Fitzpatrick, and TJ Watt round out the list here. My biggest thing, this was my biggest takeaway from this entire list. I think the only critique that I had, and I don't even know if it was a critique, the Alex Highsmith, Deontay Johnson ranking. Very interesting, my friend. Very interesting. I think a lot of people, a lot of Steelers fans might not like that one, but I want to know how did that come about?
That was a tough one for me. The two that really I felt like I struggled with the most was ranking Johnson and Highsmith, and then ranking Sam Allo and Daniels. So
Yep.
that was really rough. I actually went down a little bit of a rabbit hole to watch some more Sam Allo film to see who I thought was better between him and Daniels. But those two were the closest things for me. I felt like everything else was easy up top. TJ Watt, Minka, Cam Hayward, I felt like those were kind of shoe-ins. And when I was putting together the list, it took me about 10 seconds to fill those out, other than writing just the synopsis or analysis below their names. The thing is with me, I think, first off, I think Deontay and Alex Highsmith are really good. I really do think they're both really good players. So it's not that there was a huge gap between either guy. It's just I think that I like what Deontay brings, and I value his skill set maybe just a little bit more. I think he's a little bit better of a receiver with a elite trait, whereas I think than Highsmith is as an edge rusher.
Okay.
But they were relatively close for me. I still think that I think it was interesting when I was filling out the list that 6 of those players that I put in the top 10 were on offense. That was
Yes.
probably surprising and something that I would not have guessed. But the Steelers are, in my opinion, a little top heavy on defense. I mean, that's what happens when you have, arguably the best edge rusher. You have arguably the best, free safety in the game. Cam Hayward's still playing at a really high level. So, Highsmith was the other guy that kind of I knew was going to fall in the top 10 somewhere. I struggled finding someone else that I felt really good about in that spot. That's sort of what gave the nod to Harris and Pickens. I wanted to put Pickens there just because I did the list based on, talent and production. And I think Pickens had a really solid rookie season production wise, but I just think he's super talented and the sky's really the limit for him. So that put him over the top. I thought that he was a little more consistent week in to week out, despite being a younger player. And that's why I put him over guys like, Larry Ogunjobi, Chuks Okorafor. Those were the other names that were kind of like right outside the top 10 for me. So
Who was your 11th? Larry O? Chooks?
it would have been, I'd have to go back and look at my list. I had a handful of like 4 or 5 guys, but I think with Najee, he's a tough guy to rank, right? Because like we
Yes.
haven't seen, some of these guys. You look at, Alex Highsmith. I push back really hard about the narrative that he's like a product of the guys that he plays around, but
No.
I think Alex Highsmith, when you look at a guy like him and the situation that he's been playing in over the past 2 seasons, it's a pretty good situation. I mean, when you're playing in the front four for all those guys, I mean, for TJ Watt, even, he's in a good situation. This is a good system for him. He plays with good players around him. I think that's a good situation. But you look like Najee, I don't really think that Najee's been blessed with the best situation. And that's why it's hard for me to, think, how to rank him, because he's been super inefficient, but some of those things I think are beyond his control. So I don't know. He's a tough guy to rank. I still believe in the talent though.
Do you have a guy that you think could sneak his way in here by the end of it? Because that was my biggest thing, is trying to think of guys that I think, and it's not necessarily like, oh, I think people are going to make a jump, because I think Calvin Austin, Jalen Warren, maybe Allen Robinson, like there are names that could have big years. I think it's more of like this top 10 is tough. It's tough top 10 to crack. Like Najee Harris is the end of it, and you expect Najee Harris to have his best season yet because he's got his best offensive line. George Pickens is only in year 2. Like it's tough to crack this top 10.
Yeah, I think the rookies, Porter Jr. and Broderick Jones, those are both really talented guys, but I think that there are things in both of their games that are going to need some refinement. And, the rookie year could potentially be a little bit bumpy,
Yep.
with Porter Jr., really needs to refine his footwork, clean up the false steps. With Broderick, really needs to refine his hand placement and pass protection. So those two guys are certainly talented enough to get on this list relatively soon, even maybe as soon as next season. But it would definitely be a little surprising if they were able to kind of just make that jump immediately. But we'll see what happens. I think they're both super talented. Larry Ogunjobi is a guy that I think it could possibly crack the top 10 as well. But with Ogunjobi, it's always a matter of, what type of player are you getting week to week. I don't think he's the most consistent of guys on a week to week or even snap to snap basis. So he's a tough one, but definitely, talented enough to be on the list. So
Yeah, 100%. All right, the biggest name that I think everybody's going to worry about here. How far away from the top 10 is Kenny Pickett? Did you even have the conversation with yourself of, is he in an honorable mention?
I didn't know. It wasn't. No, he really didn't come to my mind when I was talking about that. But
how far do you think he's got to go to get in there, to push the limits of top 10?
I mean, it would take a sizable jump, I think, a year or two to get there. But I don't want to put, necessarily like statistical barriers or anything like that that he has to clear in order to make the list or whatever. But I think that, Pickett definitely, if I'll say this, if he gets to the point where he's looked at as one of the best players on not just the offense, but on the team, the Steelers are going to be in a good situation because I think the roster itself has came a long way. And I think that Steven and I talked about this a little bit on Monday, but I think, the narrative around the Steelers right now, when it comes to like the AFC North and things like that, I think that the reason the Steelers are often picked to finish last or, not picked to finish first in the division is because I think that if you look at how the media perceives the other quarterbacks in the division, Joe Burrow's looked at as, one of the top guys in the league right now. Lamar Jackson has some health concerns, but, he's been one of the top players in the league for a long time. So, and then Deshaun Watson, I think people are still just holding on to what he was in Houston and overlooking, what he's been the past couple of years, with the suspension, sitting out, whatever. But, if that's the big question mark, can Pickett elevate his game to get in the same, breath as some of those AFC quarterbacks? That's really, I mean, that's the number one question, right? Staring the Steelers and,
Yes.
the entire city in the face. I mean, if you're going to go to the playoffs and you're going to hopefully compete for Super Bowls and, play deep into January, February, you got to have a good quarterback. And it's not, in the AFC, solid or average might not even be good enough because you look at all the names that are in this conference, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, I already talked about Burrow, Jackson, guys like that. I mean, there's a ton of incredible talent in the conference. So I'm excited to see what Pickett, what he does this season, where he improves. But no, he wasn't a guy that really I consider too much for the list right now.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think he was anywhere near the top 10, but I agree 100% with what you're saying. That was my thought too, is like Pickett has the easiest route, in my opinion, to crack the top 10 by next season because the Steelers' fate heavily relies on how good Kenny Pickett is. And we'll see that in training camp. Like, I don't want to I'm holding off on putting anything out there with Kenny Pickett right now because, in the words of Mike Tomlin, everybody should look good in minicamp. And if you don't look good in minicamp, there's a problem. So, talking about Kenny Pickett's year 2 jump before anybody puts pads on is a totally different situation. There's going to be pressure at training camp. That's real action going on there. The preseason will tell a different story. We'll know more as, things start to heat up. But I agree. I think the easiest route there is Kenny Pickett. Do you